Like corridors in a large building, blood vessels run through all of the tissues in your body. Although some blood vessels are as wide as your thumb, most of them are much finer than a human hair. If all of the arteries, capillaries, and veins in your body were hooked together end to end, they would stretch a distance of almost 100,000 kilometers. That's long enough to wrap around the Earth twice, with a lot left over. We have thousands of kilometers of blood vessels throughout our bodies because they transport the liquid that is vital to survival: blood. So the first type of blood vessel we'll discuss today are arteries. So remember, arteries begins with an A. These structures carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. Blood enters through the left atrium and is pumped out of the heart through the left ventricle. The aorta is a large artery that branches off into smaller arteries. The coronary artery carries blood to the heart itself, while other arteries branch off to carry blood to other organs such as the brain, intestines, stomach, lungs. Arteries eventually branch off into smaller structures called arterioles. Now let's take a closer look at the structure of arteries. Arteries are very thick, but they're also flexible. They are made up of 3 layers. The innermost layer is made up of epithelial cells, which are smooth, allowing blood to flow freely and without friction. The middle layer is made up of smooth muscle tissue. And remember, smooth muscle is a type of involuntary muscle. So we don't have to think about relaxing and contracting the muscles in our arteries. They just do it. And the outer wall is composed of connective tissue. It is important that arteries are strong so they can withstand the pressure of flowing blood against their walls without bursting. They must also be flexible, as they also expand and relax as the heart beats pumping blood throughout the body. If you take a close look at this picture, the artery wall appears as a thick band surrounding a clump of red blood cells. The red blood cells are in the center. Now, how do arteries and pulse relate? When you take your pulse, you're actually measuring how fast your heart is beating. You can feel your pulse at the site of major arteries, such as the one on the inside of your wrist, called the radial pulse, or your neck, which is where your carotid artery is. And so every time your heart beats and it pumps and then relaxes, your arteries do the same thing. Arteries also regulate blood flow. The layer of muscle in an artery acts as a control gate, adjusting the amount of blood sent to different organs. When it wants to restrict blood flow, the muscle will contract. When we want to allow for more blood flow, the smooth muscle inside your artery will relax, opening up. So, for example, after we eat, our stomach and intestines need a greater blood supply for digestion. Arteries leading to those organs open wider, allowing more blood flow to run through them. In contrast, when you are running, your stomach and intestines aren't working as hard, therefore they need less blood than the muscles in your legs. The arteries leading to the digestive organs become narrower, decreasing the blood flow to these organs, while the arteries leading to your legs will become wider, allowing for more blood flow. We'll now be looking at capillaries, which are the second type of blood vessel we'll be discussing in this lesson. So as we can see, blood flows away from the heart through arteries, and then they branch off into smaller structures called arterioles. Arterioles are then connected to capillaries, and in the capillaries, materials are exchanged between blood and the body cells. Some of these materials include oxygen, glucose, and carbon dioxide. Capillary walls are extremely thin. They are only one cell thick, allowing materials to easily pass through them. Materials are exchanged between the blood and the body cells by diffusion. Remember, diffusion is the process by which molecules move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Remember, diffusion requires no energy input. So if we take a look, glucose is more highly concentrated in the blood than it is in the body cells. So when it reaches the capillaries, it's in a higher concentration in the capillaries than it is to the cells. And the capillaries are in the cells. So glucose can easily diffuse across the one cell thick capillary wall into the body cells. In contrast, the body cells will have a higher concentration of carbon dioxide than the blood. Therefore, carbon dioxide will diffuse from the body cells into the blood. This blood containing waste has little oxygen and returns back to the heart. The last type of blood vessel we'll be discussing are veins. So after blood moves through capillaries, it enters larger blood vessels again called veins. Veins carry blood back to the heart. The blood traveling through veins is going to be low in oxygen and very high in carbon dioxide. The walls of veins also have 3 layers, but they're much thinner than artery walls. By the time blood flows into veins, the pushing force of the heart is much smaller than it is in the arteries. So there are several things that help blood move through arteries so that it can return back to the heart. Veins are near our skeletal muscles, so the contractions of our muscles help to push blood along. So as you run or walk, the skeletal muscles in your legs contract and squeeze the veins in your legs, pushing blood back up towards the heart. Larger veins in our bodies have valves, just like the valves in our heart. These valves prevent blood from flowing backwards. In other words, we don't want blood from our veins flowing backward into our capillaries and back into our arteries. And lastly, breathing movements exert a squeezing pressure against veins in the chest. This pushes blood back towards the heart. So if we take a look at the diagram, arteries have an elastic layer because arteries have to deal with the beating and the relaxation of the heart, which in turn forces the artery to expand and relax. However, the veins do not expand and relax, so they have an inner layer that's not elastic. Additionally, they have valves, which prevents backflow. Arteries do not require backflow because the force of the heart is pushing the blood forwards. So we can take a look at these diagrams of arteries, capillaries, and veins. To the left, you'll see microscope pictures of first an artery, which you can look at and see the wall is much, much thicker. The capillaries are much smaller and have a very thin wall, only one cell layer thick. And then we can look at the veins, which are somewhere in the middle. The wall of the veins are not as thick as the arteries, but they're also not as thin as a capillary. And if we look at the picture of the right, we can see how they're all attached. We have arteries which pump blood away from the heart, go into arterioles, and then Material is exchanged between the capillaries and body cells, which then enters a venule and then a vein and back to the heart. Blood pressure. Blood traveling through blood vessels behaves similar to that of water moving through a hose. Blood exerts a force, called blood pressure, against the walls of blood vessels, just like when you're watering the garden and you have with a hose, and first the spigot is almost only a little bit open, and you can see the pressure of the water is pretty low. When you allow the spigot to flow, to allow the spigot to flow, okay, I need to stop.